Hello, welcome to this new Gispi's Atari Stuff video. As the name indicated, this channel is all about things Atari. But every now and then I like to take a sidestep and look at non-Atari products. For example, last year I made a video about the Nintendo NES. But not long after that I got my hands on a Nintendo SNES. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. But of course we also look at it in relation to Atari. A while ago I got this text message from my son. He was at a local flea market and someone was selling a Nintendo SNES for only 20 euros. He asked if I was interested. Yeah, for that amount of course I was interested. But it was just a console, no controller, cable or games. But it still looked like a good deal. So he bought it for me. Let's see with what he came home with. And here it is, the Nintendo SNES, or the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It looks quite good. The yellowing is not too bad. And it came with this adapter. No idea what it's for. See if I can remove it. Yes, it's off. Later I will Google what I can do with it. Yes, the buttons feel okay. Now of course I hope the system works. So we should test it. But first I'm going to clean it. Well, that looks nice again. Now let's see if we can find out if it works. But that's gonna be difficult without cables. But if you look at the photo of the system while it was on the market, we see that there was a cable with it. It was probably the video cable of the SNES. I think the seller thought it belonged to that Sony PlayStation. Yeah, or he hoped to sell it separately. And I can't blame my son for not knowing that. I'm glad he took it with him. If we look at the connections on the back, we see that a 9-volt AC adapter is needed. Now I heard that this is the same power adapter as came with the NES in Europe. And of course, I still have that one. So let's have a look. Yes, indeed, 9-volt AC. Note that the NES power adapter in the US has an DC output. So that cannot be used with the SNES. But I can use this one. Now the video connection. The SNES, like the NES, also has an RF connection. So I can connect it to a television with the RF cable of the NES. But then I don't have a game yet. But of course we can see what the SNES does without a game. Now, I have connected the NES power adapter to the SNES and the RF cable goes to this TV. See what it does. I have no idea what kind of image it gives when there is no game cartridge inserted. Okay, it gives a black image. That could be a good sign. And the power LED is also on. But to really test it, I need a cartridge. And a controller. So we have to go searching for that. In the meantime, we can look at the history of the SNES. And then especially in relation to Atari. But we first go back to the Nintendo NES. This system was released in the US in 1985. After the Japanese version, the Famicom, had already been a great success in Japan for a while. And with the NES, Nintendo also had a big success in the US. That gave Atari the idea to re-enter the game console market. So they released the 17800 Pro system in 1986. This system was actually supposed to be released in 1984, but it was cancelled due to Atari's transition problems from Warner to the Tramels. In that same year, Atari also released the 2600 in a smaller form, which was soon named the Atari 2600 Junior. This older hardware could not really compete against the Nintendo NES. Atari also released the XE game system in 1987, but that was no match for the NES either. But then came some serious competition from another corner. In 1988, Sega released in his home country Japan the 16-bit Sega Mega Drive. This console did well among fanatic gamers. A year later, the console was also released in the US under the name Sega Genesis. Sega went all out on the attack at the Nintendo with the marketing slogan "Sega does what Nintendo don't." When Sega released the first Sonic game in 1990, the console really started to catch up with the 8-bit Nintendo NES. Nintendo's answer was the SNES, or the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. This is also a 16-bit console and was released in the US in 1991. Atari saw that its 8-bit consoles were now losing the battle. In 1991, the 2600 and the XEGS were taken off the market, and in 1992 it was also over for the 17800. In the meantime, Atari was already developing two new consoles. For this, it started a partnership with Flare Technology. This company from Cambridge was set up by ex-Sinclair Technology team members and had already made an impression with the Flare 1 system. Flare Technology had offered Atari to make two new systems in 1990, which would blow away the competition. The first system they worked on was the Atari Panther, a 6032-bit system which would be released in 1991. But also the development of the 64-bit Atari Jaguar was started, which would follow up the Panther in the future. When the Panther was to be released in 1991, Flare Technology already had made great progress with the Jaguar. So Atari decided to cancel the Panther and wait until the Jaguar was ready. Well, it took until 1993 before the Jaguar could be released. The launch campaign emphasized that this was a 64-bit system to distinguish it from the 16-bit SNES and Genesis. Although it was very doubtful whether you could call it a 64-bit system. The system had a 16-bit 68000 processor and two 30-bit coprocessors, which were connected to a 64-bit data bus. This multi-chip architecture of the game console made developing games very difficult. Jaguar games were mostly delayed and the others were rushed out of the door and were less impressive. Atari ST and Amiga games were also ported, where the 68000 code was transferred almost one-to-one. This caused the two 30-bit coprocessors to be ignored, resulting in 16-bit games that looked no better than the SNES and Genesis games. This led to disappointing sales of the Atari Jaguar. When Sega released the Saturn and Sony the PlayStation in 1995, it was the final blow for the Atari Jaguar. In 1996, Atari stopped shipping the Jaguar. In the same year, Nintendo came with the answer to the new consoles, the Nintendo 64. Nintendo stopped with the SNES in the US in 1999. But in Japan it continued until 2003. And then we go back to my SNES, because I'm still not sure if it works properly. That's why I went looking for a controller and a game. After a while I came across this controller on the Dutch auction site Marktplaats. The seller asked a reasonable price for it and he lived in Amsterdam, so I could pick it up myself. When I was there to pick up the controller, I told him that I now only needed a game. He said he also had games for sale. I asked which game was the cheapest and he came up with this game, Disney's Aladdin. It seemed like a fun game to me, so I bought that one too. Now I can finally find out if the SNES works. Yeah, I'm really curious. Yes, it plays. That is good news. And I also want to try this game. Yeah, actually a quite fun game. And then of course we have this adapter. I googled it and it turns out to be an NTSC adapter. With this you can play games from the US on an European machine. You slide the adapter into the cartridge port and here at the top you can put an NTSC game cartridge from the US. I don't know yet what I'm going to do with it. Maybe I sell it. Okay, now I know that the SNES works, I would really like to have a video cable. That will give a better picture than the signal via the RF modulator. Now I was recently in The Hague and there's a very good game store. If you ever are in The Hague, I can definitely recommend it. And there they had a video cable for sale for the Nintendo 64. But the salesperson said that the cable also works on the SNES. So let's try that. Okay, now I have the new cable between the SNES and the monitor instead of the RF cable. And it does indeed work. And the picture is a lot better. Now that I have a fully working system, I can start looking for more games. Only, I saw that the games for the SNES are a lot more expensive than I'm used to for the Atari, especially here in the Netherlands. In the UK, for example, they are a lot cheaper. But my son was recently in Liverpool and he came across this game. Yeah, for that price you can't leave that behind. Now we have also a Mario game for the SNES. Another place where you can find games for a good price is the annual market on King's Day here in the Netherlands. I came across this game for only €2.50. As a child I was a big Smurfs fan, so of course I also took this game with me. And finally I recently found out about the existence of this game. Arcade's greatest hits, the Atari Collection 1. Yeah, as an Atari fan I have to have this game of course. So now I can play Centipede on the Nintendo SNES. Let's see how that looks like. Well, it's nice, I now have a complete Nintendo SNES system. But I don't think I'm going to put together a whole SNES game collection. For that, I find the games a bit too expensive. I'd rather spend that money on Atari games. But in the meantime, I have quite a few Nintendo systems. So, what's next? A Nintendo 64? Only I think if I came across one for a very low price. But for now, we come to an end to this video. Thanks for watching. If you press the like button and subscribe to this channel, you make me very happy, because we're almost at 1,000 subscribers. So for now I'll say see you at the next Gespi Atari stuff video. Bye!